this is when we really had to ask ourselves if we want to settle in Germany or in any other third country.
Yeah.
Why would we want to do it? Or if it's actually time to go back to one of our home countries. It was illogical for many people. It was in a way risky because I have to give the background. We did not have like a large capital or everything set, but we did not want to live in the city. It was even me who didn't want to live in the city. And there are like these two parallel worlds. There is this world of the people who moved and the world of the locals, and they do not intersect in any way. And the Indonesians, and this surfer crowd, like it's like two countries, two realities.
Yeah.
And I knew that in India it will not be like this. It's just when it comes to corporate life, if this is what a person is seeking for, I would not go back to India. I would stay in Germany.
Yeah.
Because in terms of the life balance, whenever I moved countries, I never miss anything from the previous country, and each of my moves is something that comes from the space not of a need but of my personal decision. I have really strong reasons to move, and I'm very realistic. I know what will be the compromises, things that take longer to happen, and maybe not always at the quality that you want them to do. But it was. Nothing came by surprise to me.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Desi Return. Today, I'm really excited to have Miss Anastasia on our show. So Anastasia and her family moved to Goa 3 years back after spending a lot of time in Germany. And I'm really excited to looking forward to our discussion, especially from someone who was not born in India, and what was the motivation for them to move to India? How is the life after the move experiencing, for the last 3 years? And the pros, cons, and some of the insights from a different perspective. So I'm really, really excited to have you on our show. With that, welcome to our podcast.
Thank you for the warm welcome, Avinash. I'm really excited and happy to share my experience, because if somebody is considering, to do the same move, I can imagine how many thoughts are running through their head.
Yes, for sure. So let's start a bit about your background and your journey, and we can start from that and then take it from there.
Sure. So I'm from Russia. This is where I was born and raised. But in my early 20s, I left. So I left initially to do my studies. Then life happened, that I went to work. So I was lucky to live in several countries. And in one of those countries, I met my husband, who is Indian. We met in South Africa. So you asked about my professional background. It's a very long story, so I'll try to keep it brief, because otherwise, the entire podcast will be just about my career journey. But at that point, I started my career in international development. Actually, my first education is international law. My second is in public policy. And I went try to, work in the public sector. So, I was very internationally inclined, if you wish, because in Moscow, I graduated from a diplomatic university. So I kind of knew that I would move places. This was my dream. And this is what, I prepared myself for in life.
Yeah.
And, being in Africa, meeting a guy from India, like there was no contradiction there. It kind of was very logical. And then after we met, we moved to Germany together.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it was related to studies and to work, to our professional path. And Germany was the country where we started our lives as a family.
Yeah.
And it also was the time when I did a complete pivot in my career, because I decided to go to work in private sector. I was kind of not exactly disappointed, but realized that I'm not made to work in international development, because for my personal values, there were a lot of contradictions in that field. I don't know how much you're familiar with that. So while it sounds exciting, I felt that I want, to work somewhere that I'm in full control of how the funding comes to me and how I spend it. And the only way to do it was to go to private sector and eventually to start your own business. So this is how I became an entrepreneur. I completely reskilled myself. I did thousands of courses in marketing because I had the research background. So it was easy for me, to start working with data. And along those lines, I built a startup in Berlin. And one thing after another, I found myself that I'm living in Germany with my husband. I have to call him by name, okay? I always find it really awkward when I get referred to him, my husband. So with Srikanth, and he at that time was working in IT, maybe a little bit of a predictable career for an Indian engineer. And we moved from Berlin to the south of Germany. So I was starting my own business. He was working in his field. We had a baby. And this is when we started questioning our choices. I think that when a child arrives, I know that you have two kids, right? You mentioned before, you start seeing a lot of priorities in your life differently, and you also become more conscious. Like some people say that you just become more mature and you grow up, but I would rather call it that you maybe think a little bit more planned about the future, right? Because you have this responsibility and you also maybe take too much on yourself, thinking how much influence you're going to have on your child's life, and you want to become an engineer of that. So you align your choices accordingly. And also while being in a different country in Germany at that time, and you should also imagine that I'm from Russia, he's from India, we live in Germany, so we constantly iterate between three countries. Yeah. Just also, I think a very important note to make that I know that a lot of people, they move abroad from their own countries because they really want to relocate. They really want to settle somewhere else. And it's also typical for Russians. Sometimes it's the motivation for it, opportunities, sometimes curiosity, often it's political reasons, right? So there are many reasons why people do that. But neither me nor Shrikant ever had this motivation. We actually, both of us ended up working abroad and hopping between countries was because we were curious. It was like a life experience, but we also felt as comfortable in our own countries. So our connection with Russia and with India was still very strong. And it started becoming difficult, constantly going here and there. And he was still in his corporate job. So, there are also questions of leaves. And probably we'll go deeper now in our conversation, this podcast about Germany, but Germany is a particular system. So you're either happy being a part of it or you're not. And it's not a system that's also designed for entrepreneurs, at least not for small and middle-sized businesses. It's just not the environment for that. So there were a lot of things that were making us feeling that we had to do a lot of adjustments. And we didn't really... there was no reason for us, None of us were German. We didn't necessarily have better opportunities or life conditions. Let's call it as it is, right? Like what can motivate people to stay in Germany rather than in our home countries. And then as our daughter started growing up, we also realized that, we all along, we've been having like an expatriate status. We were foreigners who were working in the country, and then suddenly we became immigrants in the country. And without choosing to do that, right? So this is when we really had to ask ourselves if we want to settle in Germany or in any other third country. Why would we want to do it? Or if it's actually time to go back to one of our home countries. And again, our child was a very big motivation also to kind of push the decision. And it was also happening during Corona. So I think what happened during Corona, that a lot of aspects of life circumstances were very intensified, right? Like we were all in extreme situation. And our child was at that time 2 years old. So it's like a hot toddler phase. And everyone was completely isolated, so it really gave us a lot of air to kind of question how we gonna raise the child. It showed a lot of sides of the society. And it was very clear that we would not be happier, there. Because so yeah, this was pretty much the journey. Yes, and coming back, finishing my thought about the kid and the influence of, going back to Germany or sorry, to India or to Russia was that she started building exceptionally strong bond with our parents, with her grandparents, and we're really blessed in that way. We have amazing parents, also the way that they spend the time like with their grandchildren and the commitment that they put into it. And we thought that, there is so much for her to learn from our backgrounds, from our families, our cultures, which are very strong, in many ways. And that we really want her to grow up in that. We don't want her to be perceived not a part of the community where she's growing up with, just because, her parents come from different background, and that would happen in Germany. It can be different in different countries. I'm only talking about my experience. It would happen in any European country, not just in Germany. And yes, that was very important for us, that she would grow up being a part of, where she is. And that's how we decided to do the move. It was illogical for many people. It was in a way risky because I have to give the background, we did not have like a large capital or everything set, or from outside, sometimes it looked if somebody moves from Europe to Goa, then they're ready to retire. Not at all. We've been working online. Until now, we're having online businesses. So, we kind of made this possible. And also, I should say that it was a very well-planned move, in a way that by the time that we moved, I was working for several years on a professional side, that I'm location independent. That if I have to go, because I already knew that time, that there will be the time that I will probably stay in Russia for some years, in India for some years. So I have to not be really dependent, for example, having dependent source of income of one particular country or even city. So I've been really working towards it. And then it became possible. And that's how we moved. It was a very long story. Sorry about that.
No. Thanks a lot for such a high-level overview and talking to the key points, right? So first of all, very interesting background, working in different countries, the experience and international, and how you realize what you really want and based on your own principles. And I think the main driving factor, like how you want to bring up your kid. I think that's where the genesis of the thought of going back to the home country, whether India or Russia, and then make a decision. So thanks a lot for walking us through the thought process and how you come to that. So I think I definitely want to touch base and understand a little bit. I think you kind of gave an indication. So you kind of worked on the planning side, right? So that you have that flexibility to work at any place. It's not location dependent. I think the idea of the moving away from Germany for different reasons started when you have your kid born, so maybe if you can talk about the planning, right? So from that thought to the execution, I know which intensified during the COVID. So is it 3 years, 4 years period, and how you kind of pivoted on in terms of the planning, so that you are location independent, or to make this feasible in terms of making a move to a different country.
Yeah,
So
sure.
anything that you can talk on the planning side.
So I have to be honest that it was not that I've been planning for 3 years to move to India particularly, and I did the steps towards it. It was more, I would say that when the child was born, it was clear for us we will not settle in Germany, because it was also a point that either we apply for the citizenship and, we accept Germany and, go full in and I have to know that I have a lot of respect to Germany as a country, as a society. It's an amazing place. And I know a lot of people who chose to relocate there, took the citizenship, and they're thriving. But you have to be a certain type of a person, so which we are not, right? So for us, it was clear that professionally we would actually not thrive there. And when my daughter was not even 1 year, also a good thing about German system is that it's possible to take maternal and paternal leave. And like you get paid a very minimum sum, so it's not much, but it's something that can support you, especially if you spend those months somewhere outside.
Yeah.
So we went to Indonesia,
Okay.
and we spent some time traveling there and being with you there. And I should say that that was when it solidified in us, because we also met a lot of people who live location-dependent life. And we understood that this kind of settled corporate life is not going to work for us. It's
Right.
just not. So we have to actively seek opportunities to be not dependent on it. And this is when it came to our mind that, you know, like when you meet people and you see what kind of life is possible to design,
Yes.
then otherwise you just in your bubble and then you just possible, right? So that kind of opened the window of opportunity for us to even notice that there are options. And so we came back. It was not Corona yet. It was before that. And we already were kind of shopping for
Thinking.
options. And
Yeah.
at that time, I was already building my own business, my online business. But I took it in the direction at that point because, you know, there were like different crossroads that it will not be serving a German market, for example. So I decided I will serve international market, English speaking market, because if I serve German market, you know, then I have less kind of possibility for movement.
Yeah.
And yes, so that consciousness started coming there. And then we started exploring. So we started considering, what if we maybe we should move to Russia first, you know, maybe there are third countries. We were thinking maybe we should go to Portugal, you know, maybe there's something else. So initially we did not think of coming back as such, right? We were just thinking of trying other options.
Yes.
Then the child started growing up, and that's when, you know, as I said, that bonding started building with the grandparents. And, you know, we also started realizing time goes, they age, you don't know, you know, how much it will continue. So that our stop should not be the third country. And we went to India, and we actually initially didn't think of moving to Goa necessarily. And we started exploring the opportunities. One of the options for us we considered was, so we thought of going to the north to the mountains. Then we thought of going to rural Kerala, and we went there. And that was when we realized we will not be able to live there. It has to do more with the fact that there is a certain lack of simply educational infrastructure and the social connection. Like for me, the community is super important.
Yeah.
The community of other entrepreneurs, active people, right? So we were looking not just at the country, but actually at the space place where we will all feel comfortable.
Yes.
Yeah. And until maybe 6 months before the move, we did not know that we would move to Goa and to India. But then that decision came. And in terms of like more of the planning, so as I said, it was more about kind of settling the general lifestyle design to be flexible.
Yeah.
Concrete planning for India and execution of the move, it was not last minute, but it was just the last few months. So there was not like massive preparation in that way.
Got it.
Yeah.
So sounds like I think it's the not settling in Germany and having the option. So that is clear in your mind. But I think in terms of finalizing the place, it was more towards the end. But before that, you have been like, having such that you have the flexibility, location independent to choose whichever place you want to choose. So that's great. So I think kind of you talked a little bit about this place. I'm really curious and I want to understand this a bit better. So is Srikanth's parents somewhere close by? Like, how did you end up choosing? I know you kind of evaluated like mountains, Kerala, Goa. Just curious. I mean, one of the big factors is also like, the kids spending time with grandparents, right? So just curious in terms of the selection of Goa. And how did you go about it? Like you visited, you spent some time visiting all the places. What was some of the thought process? I know you mentioned about the community in general, like everybody can thrive and so on. So let's talk a little bit more so that, someone who doesn't have like a big bonding back in India, or they're more flexible in the place that they can choose from, how can they approach? So, yeah.
Yeah, so talking about the location of the parents, yeah, it may sound again a little logical because they live in Calcutta. So but there are also siblings in Srikanth's family. So, and because they're retired, they keep visiting kids. So they are the real digital nomads, not the digital, but nomads. So we did not consider, like the intention was not actually at this point to live together.
Yeah.
And because they are independent right now, I mean, if the point comes, then it will be a different story. But at this point, they are also, the parents actually enjoy that they have their, independent space. The thing that many kids, grown-up kids don't realize actually that
Yeah.
even elder parents need their space.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So basically we just keep traveling to each other and, like my husband's Srikanth's sister, she lives in Bangalore, for instance. So we meet there.
Yeah.
So that was not a factor for us to decide. We knew that as long as we are in India and not super remote, pretty much 2-hour flight will, get us anywhere. And Calcutta is also a well-connected place. Why Goa? We generally very well traveled in India, and Srikanth, his whole childhood, so he also didn't grow up in the same place. His family used to move every 2 to 3 years. So he's also having a unique story in a way that he doesn't associate. I know that in India, for people, they associate themselves with a certain place, right? Where they're from, where the family is from, the language they speak. And in his case, I always call him the global Indian because he speaks many languages. Every 2 years, he had to learn the new one. And he lived in North, Central, South India. And he really has this very, united perspective of the country. And also he had an opportunity to kind of, feel the part of different places.
Yes.
And I actually traveled to India even before I met him. Like first time I went to India, it was like 18 years ago. Yes, I was really young, like a teenager. And I kept coming back. First we were dating, we kept coming back each time we would travel in India. We got married, each time we would come visit the parents. We would always make it like a mission to see something else in the country and travel around. So we had a bit of understanding of what kind of vibe different places have, which places would be like more open or less open, more inclusive or less inclusive, because obviously we looked for a certain comfort.
Yes.
And it's kind of a tricky place to find, because if you move to a big city, it's never an issue, right? The places are cosmopolitan, you have all the infrastructure, you have all different type of people, anything and anyone. There are a lot of inspiring people, a lot of things are happening. You'll always find your tribe and the comfort you seek. But we did not want to live in the city. It was even me who didn't want to live in the city, because I find it overstimulating environment. Again, the child, we wanted her to really be also to grow up aware of the natural environment. And of course, there are matters of lifestyle. Again, when we're kind of engineering this move, we didn't want to move to the same. Like we knew very clear the point of what kind of life we want to live. And for me, it's utterly important for I really promote it a lot, even on my social media. I don't know if you ever saw any of this, but to watch the nature daily, to be in the nature, to be connected to the nature, to be an opportunity to come out of the house and within 15 minutes to, be surrounded by trees and birds, but not by people and vehicles.
Yeah.
Goa is still a very urbanized part, right? It's not exactly that remote village. And we do travel a lot to villages, even to take, break from the crowd here. But it's just the only place that was this sweet compromise, right? Because a lot of people move here with different backgrounds. You still have a lot of access to nature, though it's unfortunately fading. Like even in these 3 years that we've been here, there were a lot of irreversible changes made.
No.
But there is still hope that there will be a halt, put to it at some point. And it's also used to having a lot of international crowd, Goa. It's not a big place, so you don't need to spend hours, driving around. And I come from Moscow. It's a massive city, and it was normal for me at that time to spend 2 hours to go anywhere just within the city, and I would still not reach the end of the city. And I'm not talking about the traffic jam.
Yeah,
it's like
just the basic, like the
yes, and don't even get me started on the traffic, right? So here it's very lucky that if you design your life in a certain way, you do not have to spend your time on those things, like, sitting in the car. And of course, you have to be also aware that you have to pay certain respect to the community around you. And I think it's also was the reason, actually, I think it's important to note why while considering options of moving to any other country, we still decided to go to our own and to India, and to Goa particularly. For me, it's important to feel included. And for instance, if you go, a lot of foreigners move to Bali and they settle there.
Yeah.
And we spend there some time, and there are like these two parallel worlds. There is this world of the people who moved and the world of the locals, and they do not intersect in any way. And the Indonesians, and this surfer crowd, like it's like two countries, two realities.
Yeah.
And I knew that in India it will not be like this. It's generally the thing that I really admire about the country is that as a society, it really absorbs a lot of people, influences. I mean, it's a very controversial thing. Maybe I should not go too much into it, but I feel comfortable, and I don't, people around me do not live a different life than I do.
Yeah.
Right. So if it makes sense.
Yeah, it's a little bit more, not like an inclusive, but not like as separate as a parallel paths, I think what you're referring to, like you have experience in it. Okay. Just curious along the same lines, I think you mentioned Srikanth was in IT, right? So is he still continuing in IT? And the reason I'm asking is in Goa, again, not a lot of companies there. That's why I was just curious on that. Like, how about his career transition? He also like has something that is location independent, or he's still in the IT? Just curious on that.
Yeah, he had a very extreme career change, and it was very clear to us that if we move to Goa, it will be the end of his corporate career. The end, not in a dramatic way, but he'll have to, do something else, so to speak. Like he will not continue because obviously there are no opportunities. If he wants to continue his track, then we would need to move to a big city. But to be honest, when it comes to corporate life, if this is what a person is seeking for, I would not go back to India. I would stay in Germany.
Yeah.
Because in terms of the life balance and the system, it's a system that actually created for the corporates, for the people who work in big companies. And if you are happy there, I would definitely not move back. Honestly, it's just because in big cities here, the work will consume you. And I think this is what a lot of people are actually running away from, right? And looking for alternative paths in life. So that was very clear. Luckily, at the moment of the move, he was already involved in my business. So at that point, we were running together an online healthy cooking school. And this was the professional track that he was developing also on the side, because he certified himself as a health coach, and he was getting, kind of developing that second career while we were still in Germany. And he was supporting me. And then, right now, my main business, I think I mentioned in the private conversation that I run a YouTube agency. And it all started, we launched that online healthy cooking school. Srikanth became a face of it. We launched the YouTube channel. The YouTube channel fueled the growth of our business. And I also wanted myself to work more with other entrepreneurs. So I saw how this YouTube as a tool can be used by other entrepreneurs. And I launched an agency when we moved here to Germany, to India. And Srikanth continued on a healthy cooking school track and continued growing his YouTube. So currently he's practically a full-time YouTuber and a coach and an owner of an online cooking school.
That's great. No, thank you very much for sharing that. So how is life in India? Like you had certain expectation living here for 3 years. How did it go? Like anything that you miss, anything that you surprises? So anything that you can share on that?
I'll start with what I miss, because I don't miss anything. And but this is the type of my personality. Whenever I moved countries, I never miss anything from the previous country. And each of my moves is something that comes from the space, not of a need, but of my personal decision. I have really strong reasons to move, and I'm very realistic. I know what will be the compromises. I always say that one little thing that I miss that's very challenging here is spaces for prolonged walks. Because again, this comes maybe to my more childhood and teenage years when I just come out of the house in Moscow, and Moscow is generally is amazing city, and it's like developed, till now. I really believe it's one of the most comfortable cities as a city space, urban space to live. You just walk, you can walk for hours. And in Europe, it's similar, right? If you stay in the cities. And here, this initially was the only thing that I missed. But I found the ways, because even Goa, I'm saying like there is a nature, but you do not go to walk in the jungle, right?
Yeah.
Because we have like snakes coming in the house, and probably I became a little more cautious about going into the wild spaces after that. So, but I found my tracks, like I found my trails, I found the way to around it. I really have them mapped out, and you have the beach in the end of the day where you can always drive and walk there. So this the only thing. I found the way, and this is generally, I think, when you're very adaptable, you will not miss anything because you'll find the workarounds. You just have to want to discipline yourself to find those workarounds. Yeah. So I do not walk at 6 in the morning because there are dogs. Fine, I work now at 6 in the morning, and I go walking at 10.
Yeah.
Right. Like, these are the workarounds. So you adjust to the space. I was aware before movement what kind of challenges can be here in India in terms of day-to-day life and in terms of bureaucracy, in terms of, things that take longer to happen and maybe not always at the quality that, you want them to do. But it was, nothing came by surprise to me, to be frank. So I live, when you kind of, I think when the reality meets the expectation, then you don't have difficulties. When you have a certain expectation, when you romanticize, for instance, a certain reality, right?
Yeah.
Then this is where the problems start.
Having that realistic expectations take it a long way. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So I think that's great. So sounds like, I think, overall positive experience living in India. And so how was your kid enjoying it? Just curious on that. I think, at the time of the move, how old is she? Like, is she like 4 years, 5 years, or?
She's 6. She's about to turn 7 this year. Yeah, and definitely our move was also sped up by the fact that we were understanding that the older our child becomes, the harder it will be to adjust. And because I also personally know family stories who moved with children being older, I think the hardest phase, starting with 11 years old.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, there were some stories that literally led to a disaster because it's a very vulnerable time. And, when they're possession of a certain language, for example. So we were very cautious that we do it before, she turned a certain age, because it also had to do with the language proficiency. When she was born, you should understand that she was born with 4 languages around her. So I was speaking to her Russian, Srikanth was speaking to her Hindi.
Yeah.
In the family, we speak English.
Yeah.
And she already was going at a young age to kindergarten, to childcare, and there it was German.
Yeah.
So we left Germany just shortly after she turned 3. And this is when her speech development, they say that for multilingual kids, it's common that they speak a little later. So at 3, she was starting to speak. And she was speaking pretty much in all languages except for English, because English was a language that nobody talked to her in. Like her ear would hear it, but it actually was non-existent.
Yeah.
Like her strongest languages were Russian and Hindi at that point. But also by her age of 3, we never spent prolonged times in Russia or India. So while she was exposed through our speaking, in the community, like, it didn't exist for her out there. She didn't spend so much time with her like grandparents or anything like that. So we spent a few months in Russia first, moving to India, and this is where Russian became her prime. It's like, it opened up fully. So Russian became her first language. She went to kindergarten there.
Yeah.
Then we moved to India and we put her in the local kindergarten and preschool, it's called here, sorry. And there everybody was speaking in English and she could not understand or say a word.
Mm.
And this could be a problem perhaps if she was older.
Yeah.
But as she was 3 years old, there was no like understanding of it being a problem in a way. But I have to say that, I mean, you didn't ask, but if somebody faces the questions of multilinguality in kids,
Sure.
till exactly perhaps 3 years of age, it's enough for them to speak with their parents to, learn language. But then you have to do it more formally, like you have to go to consciously work on the language skills if you want the child to speak on a native level and on a complex proficiency level. So we hired her a tutor at 3 years old for English. It was one of her preschool teachers. So it was not like tutor, but every day after the preschool, because she had difficulties interacting with the kids. And I imagine if it was like now, even, at 6, if she would be in the same situation, it will have a certain effect for sure on, the way that she would feel herself, her confidence. There it went very fast because her ear was also trained. And after 6 months mark, I would say, so was completely proficient in English as well. So once the language hurdle was overcome, there was no problem for her to adjust. And I think, and I also see now generally how adjustable she became in different spaces, because she went to kindergarten in Germany, she went in Russia, and now, also, as I said, because we consciously work on her having proficiency in her all languages she's exposed to, every year I spend several months in Russia. And I put her in a preschool that she has no choice but to be with the kids and with the teachers in Russian language. And so she had to adjust there. Then here in Goa, we also already changed 2 schools, and she felt perfectly fine in both of them. And now she, in fact, is also learning Konkani on top of, and she perceives now Goa to be her home. And now I see that it was not there 2 years ago, but now it really solidifies in her. So actually now, if we decide to move somewhere, that will be a problem.
Yeah.
But it's very interesting that she does not, so she says that Goa is her home. She feels very comfortable here, but she is very aware that she's both, that she's Indian and Russian. And even when people ask, she always makes a point that she's not more of one than another. Yes, and the 2 parts are there. And I think that generally Goa is a great place for children, because young children, talk to me maybe in 5 years from now, I'll give you a different report. But at this point, what's the most important thing for them is the open spaces, the freedom to move and explore. And it's definitely here, there is ocean, there is a lot of opportunity to develop physically. And I don't think that I mentioned the point health, but our health and the health of the kid was also very important to decide to which place to move. Because I see, how important it is for the child to have that movement. So yes, she is probably the happiest person here for sure, because, kids also don't see the things that can irritate us. They don't have to drive a car on the potholes. And for them, the speed bump is just a amusement park.
Yes, amusement. So that's great. I believe you mentioned that is she doing like homeschooling or some special schooling? So anything that you can talk a bit about that in terms of that aspect of like, a different kind of a schooling for your kid.
Yeah. I should say the education is the thing that came up a lot also for our decision where to move. And first of all, it was the reason why we did not want to stay in Germany, because I don't know if you're aware, maybe not all listeners know, maybe it will change with time, but at least 3 years ago in Germany, the homeschooling was officially banned, like it was not an option. And it was illegal to take your child out of school for more than the holidays time, to the extent that we knew families, the father passed away, the family wants to go to India. And of course, you don't go to India for 3 days usually. It's expensive, it's a faraway trip. And the children could not join because the school they could not leave the school for like 2 weeks, 3 weeks in a row. And there are multiple cases of it. And this was also a very big issue for us because we were imagining, okay, our parents would never relocate to Germany or any other country. They're very attached. They have comfortable life,
Yes.
their community, they have their communities, like they're living good here in their own countries. They will never move. So the point will come that they will need us to be closer to them for sure. And it will be impossible. So just because of the schooling, and we would not be able to put you in any alternative schooling, right? So that was becoming a big issue. And that's why we wanted also to make sure that it's a little flexible in her case. But at the same time, of course, as parents, we wanted the best education. And India has a lot of great schools. There is no doubt about it. It has a lot of also challenging schools, right? Like there are, because I'm seeing already as an insider, as a parent, that I think your generation, a lot of people from your generation had very rough schooling system. Not everyone, but many, where it definitely, the methods that were used did not boost your confidence, right? And your desire to learn. And I see like there is a big movement of, people 30 plus, 40 plus, who wanted different for their children. They want their children to grow up confident, to love studying, to have no fear, to have no marks, to have no fear of teachers, they don't want to be concerned the child will be bullied by not just kids, but also teachers, right? And I see that there are in the country a lot of institutions of different sizes that are being now created and designed, to cater those needs, which is great. So there are a lot of options. But obviously, there you will have more options if you're in a metro city, right? Than if you're in rural area. And if you would move, for instance, to rural India, not in Goa, but let's say in Kerala, it would be even more challenging to find any options there. Because obviously, like the local village schools is not the place where we would like to send our daughter. And so we considered there are a few international schools here. But generally, I don't know if you know this reputation, but a lot of Indians were telling to us, like, you should never move to Goa because you'll ruin your kids' education.
No.
So this is a narrative that came up in many conversations. And I understand where it comes from. It, again, depends on what you expect from education.
Yes.
If you want a rigid academic, result-oriented space, extremely competitive, it's really hard to find. It's more relaxed, from all the angles. And there is, but for us, so we do have very high expectations in terms of education, I have to admit. And because also I come, from a different system, I don't consider the system I came from to be bad in any way, because I also see, good results. I went to a very good school and I was very busy and very challenged. And, I see a lot of value in having challenging educational spaces. So we were really struggling to find kind of, that balance. And we accepted that if we can't, then we'll homeschool or we'll find options. So when I say homeschooling, because we're extremely busy people, not just because of our business, but because we genuinely exercise the philosophy to live life, in different dimensions. So we do other things except for work, also as adults, and parenting. So I'm not meaning that we would be sitting and teaching our child. Like I'm for like Russian teacher, and I already should say it's not easy. Like even the relationship, right? How the child listens to you. So the idea was that we would seek opportunities online. And I know kids now who study in online schools, and it's going really well.
Yeah.
And they do not lack, like, there is this opinion that there is a lack of social connections. No, it's not, because they also have different, peer groups, and then there are opportunities usually where you live to engage in some other activities or projects with children outside of school. So we considered that. Then, we found this space. She's going to an institution called TLC. It's a learning center. And it's not a school as such. So they don't even call themselves as a school. There is no curriculum. And it's a very different approach to education, basically. I don't know how much you want me to go into the detail how the education is designed. But to say in short, we kind of took the responsibility for the education of the child. So
Okay.
if you have a great school, like international school, you literally outsource. And
Yes.
it's great when you have this opportunity. And with our lifestyle, we understood that it may not work for us. Then in this case, we have to take responsibility. And also, if one system works for one child, it
It might.
definitely doesn't work for another, you know. So, for instance, our daughter, she's extremely social. So actually putting her on tutor-based learning will not work. She
Yeah.
loves children from early age, you know, she wanted to be around children. So it's very important. And we also, like, I believe that it's also very important for the children to learn how to collaborate with each other, you know, how to talk with each other, how to be in different type of communities,
Yeah.
right? So to be a part and but not everything is designed up to you because this is real life and you know we want to prepare her for life ultimately, not for isolation.
Yeah.
And this is where the system works really well because so the in the open school they really focus exactly on that, on building the skills of working as a team, you know, having the healthy competition, of actually finding the solutions to problems, of training instead of like memorizing the multiplication tables right away at the early age. They
Yeah.
would first work on the logical thinking development. But at the same time, she gets a lot of schooling at home. So she has very organized academic focused classes also outside of the open school. So it's a little bit an unconventional approach, but I should also say that she's young, right? She's just turning 7. So I be absolutely allow the thoughts that it will change with time, just depending on her needs. But I find it great. And what also coming back to the initial, you know, thing of moving to India, India gives a lot of options, like when
Yeah.
it comes to education. And a lot of people would prefer not to have options because it's really easier. You know, when you have a system that you have like full trust on, you just outsource and, you know, you follow. For people who like to have kind of more understanding of what is happening or ready to take more responsibility, because it's also a challenge and this responsibility is scary, right? You kind of, nobody did it before you exactly the same way. So you take the best guess, right? But like in Germany, it wouldn't be an option. Like this is the school you belong to, done and finished. It's very
Yeah.
difficult to move between the schools, even between the levels of the schools, like to gymnasium or to a lower level. Here, you really have a lot of opportunities to choose what suits your child. And I should say that at this point, we are trying to, you know, take full advantage of this. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely makes sense. As you rightly said, I think, she's still an young age, like, like what's right for her. I think, the different aspects that you mentioned about social, the different options that are available and see what's right for her.
Exactly.
So I think to wrap it up, is there anything that we haven't covered that you want to bring up, or any advice for people who are thinking about moving to India that you would like to share?
I think the key, because I met a lot of people, you know, who moved or who consider moving. And to be frank, most of people who moved back, whom I met, and interestingly, a lot of people, for example, who go to the same open school, actually, the people who moved back from
Okay.
somewhere. I think because it's a certain type of a person, right, who ends up
Yes.
doing something like that, that kind of a move. And nobody regretted their move, because to actually do it, as I said, you have to have your expectations and reality matched. And when you have a family, when you have a kid or children, it's never really a decision overnight. Like it may seem like this, but usually, you know, for many people, it seemed, who knew us, there was so much shock, actually, especially from our parents. You'll be surprised. It
Yeah.
was the parents who were first, could not understand why would we move, because for them, you know, they grew up also the different generation when the world look a little bit different, opportunities and the reality of life look different in their respective countries. So they were in shock and they thought it was the stupidest thing to do, you know, to leave Germany for something else, for India and Russia in our case.
Yeah.
But I told you the story, and it actually many years led to that decision,
Yeah.
you know, even of preparation. So I could give you a motivational speech of not being afraid and just go for it. I will not, because I know that if it's even in your head at this point, then there've been many events that led into it. And I think it's just very important not to, when the things get a little bit challenging, and they will, when you move to even to your home country, because certain things you already got used to, which are not here.
Yeah.
Don't let this regret come into your head, because it's artificial. Even if you stayed, you would still regret it too that you stayed. Like, it's just something. Just focus on the reasons why you made this move, and then you will build a life that really goes according with your values and personal requirement.
Completely agree. Yeah, I think it's make an informed decision, be clear with your priorities, and make a decision. I think in terms of so that you don't have regrets later. Yeah. So thanks a lot for taking the time, sharing your journey. I mean, I really enjoyed the thought process behind how you selected a place, how you approach, and some of the planning, and even like the open school, right? I think the concept, the people approach. So really appreciate you taking the time and sharing your journey with us today.
Thank you for having Avinash. Thank
That's
you for having me on the podcast. I enjoyed the
that's great.
conversation
Thanks
too.
a lot.